No way. No way. This bolt was literally loose. There we go. Oh yeah, okay. That wasn't that hard. Like this, and just bend that up. That didn't sound good. Let's see what I did. This thing practically just shattered. Definitely was time to be changed out. Make sure all the contours are there, and we're just gonna press it straight down. Put a dab of this on here. Okay, there goes 1, 2, that one and that one. Okay. Well, right here is my new to me 2005 Toyota 4Runner with the 2UZ FE 4.7 liter V8. And we're having some leaky valve cover gaskets. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. Now, a lot of you know this engine already, of course. It is one of Toyota's most reliable engines, but it does have a few issues that are fairly common. This issue of the valve cover gaskets, this is one of those issues that is pretty common. Now, this 4Runner here has 236,000 miles, which I'm told in the comments of my previous video, this thing is barely broken in. So I hope that's true. Today we're gonna start some much needed maintenance on this thing, and it has been well maintained, but there are a few things like these leaky valve cover gaskets that do need to be dealt with. Taking a look here at the driver's side valve cover, you can indeed see that the leak is pretty significant. If we look even closer, you can actually see towards the rear of the valve cover, there is oil literally dripping off of those bolts and dripping out of that valve cover. Now, looking on this passenger side, we can see more of the same thing. Towards the rear of that valve cover, you can see liquid oil literally coming out where the gasket is. Now, thankfully, this job, while it will take some time, is very DIY. I just have a few things that I need to remove, like this whole air intake assembly, in order to gain access. I'll start by removing this throttle body cover. And next I'm going to remove this air filter box and all of the intake tubing that goes right into the throttle body. Now, there are also a few vacuum hoses that I'm going to have to remove. I'll also disconnect the plug to the mass airflow sensor. All right, last hose here. Now should lift straight out. And with all of that air intake plumbing out of the way, you can see how much more room we have here. I'm still going to remove this air box because I know it's going to block some of the bolts on the bottom side of that valve cover. Air filter. And with that air filter out, you can see we have 3 bolts we're going to have to remove to get the bottom half of this air box out. And these are 12 millimeter. And there's the bottom half of that air box. And I will note that I did disconnect the negative side of the battery. And you probably already guessed it, the next thing I'm going to remove are these coil packs. There we go. 1 coil pack coming out. Now, quickly taking a look at this coil pack, it appears to be original. So 236,000 miles, I would assume this is original, being that it's a Toyota Denso unit made in Japan. Looks pretty good. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually loosen this oil dipstick tube. There's a bracket right here. You can see the dipstick tube here, the bracket, and there is the bolt I need to remove. All right, with that bolt removed, you can see how much more play I now have with this dipstick, so I'll be able to get it out of the way when I start removing the valve cover. Okay, I believe these valve cover bolts are 10 millimeter. No way. No way. You've got to be kidding me. This bolt was literally loose. Okay, that one was a little bit tighter, but not much. Okay, let's try the one directly down underneath. Oh my gosh, it's not even tight. These bolts aren't even tight, guys. What? They're not even tight. What in the world? Let's take a look at this one. I have not touched this one yet. You can see the layer of oil all over it. Oh my gosh. A little tighter, but I'm talking like barely finger tight. Holy smokes. Guys, someone who knows about these Toyotas, is this normal? Like, what in the world? The spark plugs were not even finger tight. They were just sitting there. And now these valve cover bolts are just barely finger tight. Is that the way they're supposed to be? At 236,000 miles from 2005, you're telling me this has never been touched? It's got to have been, right? And someone just forgot to tighten everything down? What makes sense to you? Comment below. Okay, I just heard the seal break, which is good. Okay, yeah. There we go. We're moving it. Just come out, dude. Just come out. There we go. With that valve cover removed, let's take a look inside and see what it looks like. Well, here at the back of the engine, I have to say for 236,000 miles, it looks relatively clean. Overall, I really like what I'm seeing. It looks like the oil has been changed on time. I don't see any crazy buildup or anything like that. And looking towards the front there, you can see those camshaft gears. Everything still looks like new. Now with this valve cover gasket job, you can see these two kind of odd half circle shaped pieces of metal here. You can see there's gasket material here, and that's because these two pieces have to come out and be resealed. Okay, looking a little closer at the top corner of this head, you can see this kind of piece of gasket here. I'm gonna take it out so it doesn't fall into the engine. I have the valve cover flipped over here. So this is that corner of the valve cover, and you can see more of this gasket maker material here. I also wanted to point out, you can see some of it right there in the valley of the main gasket there. So like I was saying, you could see the buildup that I took off right here, and you can also see this kind of bare section where the other area of gasket maker was, which is actually this piece right here. I definitely can't confirm that that's from the factory. I don't know if these have been swapped out at some point in the past. So hopefully that gives you an idea of where and how much of that stuff to use. Now, just like that top corner, you're gonna do the same thing on this bottom corner here. So here's the inside of the actual valve cover. It definitely has a lot more oil staining, especially right there. And here's that gasket that's in there. I don't know if this is original to the truck. I'm assuming it is, but you never know. Right in the center of this valve cover, you can see these 4 circular seals. Now that I look at these seals, I can pretty much tell you that this job has never been done. And the reason why I know that is because the tabs that hold those seals in have to be bent up in order to take those seals out, and then re-bent down with the new seals. So to me, that confirms it. This is the original valve cover gasket from 2005, 236,000 miles ago. Well, my next step here is to clean this gasket surface. I'm just using a rag with some rubbing alcohol, and I can actually see the surface that the gasket is going to adhere to. So this is really what I'm focusing on. I'm not too worried about dirt up in this area. Of course, I'm trying to keep everything clean and not get dirt down into the engine, but this mating surface is all I'm really worried about as far as cleaning. I'm trying to rub up and away as I go about cleaning this, making sure that there's no other dirt on my rag that's gonna fall in. This is the part that takes the longest. Well, the surface is now clean enough for me. I went around the entire thing, top and bottom. You can see while it's not perfect, the actual gasket mating area is clean. Here's the bottom area. Everywhere where the gasket is going to touch is definitely clean. Now I'll remove those 2 half circle pieces. Oh yeah, okay. That wasn't that hard. Got to pull with a lot of force and it comes right out. We now get to go to the fun part, which is replacing the gasket and the actual valve cover. Here on the inside of this valve cover, you can see these O-rings, grommets, whatever you want to call them. They're held in with these tabs here. There's 4 tabs holding each one in. The only way to get these out is to actually bend up these tabs, and this is, I think, is just like a tin material, so it's very thin. We're replacing these seals, so we don't have to worry about, you know, messing up the seal as we bend these tabs up, but you definitely don't want to be prying and pressing against like the valve cover surface or anything like that. Seems to be fairly simple to get these things up. I might follow that up with, you know, something like a pair of needle nose pliers like this and just bend that up a little bit more. It's definitely not going to be pretty. It's a necessary part of the job. Hopefully you can see I got all 4 of those tabs bent up. I'm hoping that's enough. And now I'll take my screwdriver and try to pry this thing basically down and out. That didn't sound good. Let's see what I did. That just proves how brittle and dry these things are. This thing practically just shattered. Very, very brittle. So these, I feel like, could very well be causing, you know, a vacuum leak. If this isn't sealing well enough against that spark plug tube, I mean, air could potentially be entering into the engine, which would cause a vacuum leak. These are very important to be changed out. Okay, I got that one out. That'll hopefully give you an idea of the trouble that it took to get this thing out. I mean, it was a royal pain. If you look at the surface here, I did put some marks just in the very inner edge here. I don't think that's really going to matter. I was trying my very best to keep that from marring up that edge, but in the end I got a little bit right there. But that's not going to matter. I really don't think so. Other than that, I've cleaned the entire hole out. Well, as you can see, I got each and every one of those out. They were definitely hard to get out, but I will say, from the second one to the third to the fourth, they progressively got easier. By the fourth, it was pretty simple and I was able to get them out in, you know, a matter of 2 minutes. The trick is to first remove this inner ring, which should just break right out because it's super brittle. And what you're left with is this outer ring that is literally pressed in around this outer wall. So at this point, you just got to get your screwdriver just somewhat wedged in there until you can use a hammer to bang the end of the screwdriver and start jamming this away from that outer wall. You definitely do not want the screwdriver tilted in towards the wall. You want the screwdriver pointed away from that wall. But you have to have the edge of this metal ring, otherwise it won't work. Once you get this edge pretty well lifted away from this wall, you can then flip the whole thing over and using the screwdriver on that edge, which you can see right there, knock it out. Once I figured out that process and wasn't so worried about damaging the walls, it went pretty good. Well, after a bunch of research into which actual direction that these tube seals go, my own common sense told me they go this way, simply because you can see the direction of the lip that's inside of here, and that lip needs to go around that spark plug tube seal. So if it was installed this way and the spark plug tube goes through here, that just seems to make sense that that lip is in the correct direction. But of course, I thought maybe they're supposed to go this way. What doesn't make sense to me installing them in this direction is that there is a raised kind of lip in there, and I don't feel like that raised lip would seat well against this flat area. I feel like it's too close to the edge, and that just doesn't make any sense. So looking online, I did see that anyone I saw install these installed them this way, which confirmed my suspicion that this should be the way that they are installed. Now I have a little oil here sitting in this cap, and I'm going to use that to lube up the edge of this seal. You don't need much, of course. And with just a very, very light coat of oil around the edge of this thing, I'm going to see if I can't press this in and how hard this is going to be. You obviously want to make sure that it's going in evenly. See if I can do it with just my thumbs here. It is going in. Now I do have a socket here. This is a 1 1/4. Let me see if I can press this on there. That helped. 1 1/4 inch socket seemed to do the job. It is a little bit on the small side, but I would just kind of move it around as I use this small hammer. Just hammering it all around, and that tube seal went all the way home. Trying to look as deep in there as possible. You can see that it is fully seated. There's no space left. The blue tube seal is all the way up against the valve cover. So let's go through this process one more time. I'm going to put a little bit of oil all around. Just going to try to put it in there as evenly as possible. Okay, so now that it is in, it's just not fully seated, I'll go ahead and this one is now done, fully seated. All right, all the tube seals are done and the little tabs have been bent back over. You can see, I mean, it's not a pretty job, but it's just the way it is. I'm assuming these tabs just really are there to ensure that somehow, some way, this seal doesn't pop back into the actual engine, because it's not like these tabs are pressing up against this tube seal. They're just really there, like I said, to ensure that it doesn't somehow work its way back into the camshaft area. All right, and we are finally at the time to remove the original valve cover gasket. Let's go ahead and take this out and see how crispy this one is. It actually doesn't feel too bad. You know, these are formed gaskets, so they're not a flat gasket. They're meant to be, obviously they're meant to kind of go up and around this surface here. We don't have a flat gasket here. It certainly feels more stiff than this new one, which is very, very rubbery. And I mean, you can tell this one is brand new. Now this one, on the other hand, I've been treating it very well, but you can see there are a few cracks right there. So this definitely was time to be changed out. Now with the new gaskets, they're definitely directional. You can see this one, here's the big kind of loop there, and then you can see how close these other kind of curves are, whereas we have our big loop here on this one, and the furthest curve, or the closest curve, is way down here. So this one, you can see how far down this first curve is. This is the correct gasket. But the first thing I want to do is definitely clean out this valley here. All right, I just took my rag with some rubbing alcohol and got in this valley and just cleaned it out multiple times, I think 3 or 4 times. So I'll start laying the gasket in place. Not going to push it in yet. I just want to get it kind of where it needs to be, because there's somewhat of a trick to installing this gasket. All right, so the gasket is mostly in place. Now, the trick is we're not going to, press in and then push it along, because what that's going to do is actually stretch the material out. So what we really need to do is make sure all the contours are there, and we're just going to press it straight down. Okay, pressing it straight down ensures that we're not stretching it along as we go. Go to the corner, come back, pressing it straight down. Here's another spot right here. You can see this little curve. That fits exactly where it needs to be. So that right there is a great fit. Okay, with this passenger side valve cover completely done, all the new gaskets installed, I focused my attention on these half circle pieces. I just got done cleaning out all of the old gasket material that was in there, and there was a lot in each one of those little grooves. One other thing I did is cleaned off this entire surface again with some rubbing alcohol. And I also made sure again that these surfaces for these half circle pieces were totally clean as well. I know the recommended gasket maker is the Toyota 103 FIPG, FIPG standing for Form in Place Gasket. Everyone seems to really like that stuff. I don't have that on hand. I have this though, which is the Permatex Ultra Gray. I've used this before on my 95 Suburban to seal up the intake manifold, and it worked great. You can see it does say ideal for import and newer vehicles and sensor safe. So far as I can tell, both of these half circle pieces are the exact same. So I don't think it really matters which one was on top and all that. But you can see that the face of this side has that kind of oil stained look, and this side doesn't. That means that this side was inside the engine, which is on both of them, and I'm going to reinstall them that way. Put a dab of this on here. Now it does look like I put a lot on there. I just want to make sure that we have enough to fill in all the gaps. Okay, we have it set in place. And that was indeed a lot. So I'm going to wipe some of that up because I don't want that in the engine. Okay, there's the top corner and there's the bottom corner. Just wanted to show kind of the amount that I used. I'm hoping that I didn't use too much there. Okay, here goes the install. Just want to make sure I'm not going to accidentally dislodge the little half circle pieces back there. What is going on? Oh, it's the oil dipstick tube. Once you're around that, okay. Once we're around that oil dipstick tube, just want to make sure before I go to set this down that everything is good. Okay, there goes 1, 2, that one and that one. Okay, are we installed? Now one thing that the kit came with are these O-rings. It's like a washer with a rubber O-ring in there. And they replaced the ones on these valve cover bolts. So we're gonna have to remove these in order to install the new ones. I'm gonna hold the washer with my pliers here, and I'm gonna get my 10mm and just back the bolt out. Here's another one that's installed all the way on. Go ahead and take my 10mm, back it out. All right, now if you're curious how the new ones get installed, they can just be pushed right on. So it's not, you don't have to use a drill or anything for that. I'm just going to finger tighten these bolts. Not that they were any tighter than that from the factory, it seems. I'm just gonna get them in there. All right, we have all the bolts in at this point. Now I'm just gonna go over them kind of just by hand, and I'm gonna try to come up with a sequence starting from the center and moving my way out. So we'll call that one 1. We'll call that 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we'll cross all the way back 6, 7, 8, and then 9. I'm going to do this one here. Now, in terms of the actual torque spec, I'm not 100% sure on that. It's very hard to find actual numbers for these valve covers for this 2UZFE 4.7 liter engine. So one number that I did come up with was 7 foot-pounds, and another number was about 53 inch-pounds, which is actually below 7 foot-pounds. So I think I'm gonna stick with the lower of the numbers. Hopefully that feels tight enough as I'm tightening it. We all saw when I was messing with these bolts, just from the factory or from the last time they were touched, they were finger tight. So anything past that is obviously going to be better. The big problem is the fact that the heads are aluminum, as is that valve cover. So we don't want to over torque these. We only need a very, very tiny amount of torque in inch-pounds. So I think I'm going to start with the lowest setting that this thing has. Maybe we'll do about 30 inch-pounds here, which I believe is right about there. Okay, we're going to come up to our number 1 bolt. I might just go from there. We didn't hit 30 there, but I just want to make sure we're doing this in the proper order. I just completed my sequence at 30 inch-pounds, and now I have this torque wrench set to 40 inch-pounds. You know, this is a low dollar torque wrench. I don't know how accurate this is, and so I think at 40 inch-pounds, I'm safe from over tightening this thing. So I might actually call it a day at 40 inch-pounds. Let's see how much more we got to go from 30 to 40. Right there, maybe 3/4 of a turn. And I think I'm definitely happy with 40 inch-pounds here. Right there. So even though that sounds like a very light torque setting, 40 inch-pounds, again, I don't know how accurate my torque wrench actually is. It may be totally accurate, who knows. But I don't want to over torque these. That's the biggest problem with aluminum. On top of that, the amount of torque that I feel with my own hands on that wrench seems like it's plenty. I probably went over all of these at least 4 or 5 times in the same sequence that I came up with. So I think we're definitely good here. Like I said, especially since the bolts that came off of here, I could loosen just with my fingers. And I thought I'd show you what that gasket maker looks like now that the valve cover is fully installed. A little did squeeze out, but that looks just like the material that was there when I first took the valve cover off. And with this inner fender well all cleaned up, I can now start putting everything back together. Okay, well, the passenger side is all put back together. Every single tube, hose, everything is put back together. All right, guys, and with the completion of that passenger side valve cover gasket, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call this one part 1. Part 2 will obviously be the driver's side. Well, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit A. If we turn this bolt around, you can see that it is indeed broken off. Now, which of the bolts broke off, you may ask? Well, none other than the farthest one back on the bottom, where there is absolutely no room to get any tools in order to try to fix that. I think for this video, we've covered enough with the valve cover gasket replacement, how to take the valve covers out, how to remove all those old gaskets and install the new ones, obviously, and reinstalling everything. We also found a few potential issues that you guys might want to look for if you have the same engine. Number 1 being those spark plugs so loose in there, I cannot even believe that. And number 2, the valve cover bolts themselves are super loose as well. You know, the interesting thing is, doing a little research on this job, reading through forums, I found multiple people that talked about their valve cover bolts being super loose. So that may be an issue when the valve cover gaskets start to shrink up a little over time. Those bolts are obviously going to be a little bit loose because of that. So you might want to get in there and just check your bolts to see if they're super loose like that. If they are, you might want to tighten them up to factory spec, or just do the whole job like I just did. Anyhow, I want to make sure you guys know I am not a certified technician by any means. I'm just a do-it-yourselfer like many of you, so when I'm looking for torque specs, torque sequences, and proper ways to do things, I'm searching the internet just like you guys are. I'm coming up with the best options I can find in order to get the job done for myself. I don't want you to rely on me. This is really just for entertainment purposes only. So make sure you do your own research, do your own due diligence, and come to your own conclusions. With that being said, I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. It really helps the video and the channel. And if you've watched this far and you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. I'm Jimmy for One Road, and I will see you in the next one.